The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of Ravensholm Palace as King Alexander stood at his study window, watching the courtyard below. His jaw tightened as he observed the familiar sight that had been troubling him for months. Queen Isabella's family had arrived again, their carriages bearing the golden crest of House Blackwood, and they came not as occasional visitors, but as permanent fixtures in his royal court. Alexander turned away from the window as his private secretary, Lord Pemberton, entered the room carrying a thick folder of documents. The king's expression darkened as he recognized the papers. These were the reports he had been dreading, the ones that detailed exactly how deep the Blackwood family's interference had become in matters of state. "Your Majesty," Pemberton began carefully, "the weekly financial reports you requested." He placed the folder on the mahogany desk, his hands trembling slightly. The old servant had worked in the palace for 30 years, and he had never seen the king look so troubled. Alexander opened the folder and began reading. Each page made his anger burn hotter. The Marquis of Ravencroft, Isabella's father, had been using his position as the Queen's advisor to redirect royal funds toward his own business ventures. Lady Margaret Blackwood, Isabella's younger sister, had been hosting extravagant parties at the palace, charging the costs to the royal treasury while inviting foreign dignitaries to discuss trade deals that would benefit only the Blackwood estates. But it was the report about Lord Edmund Blackwood that made Alexander's blood run cold. Isabella's older brother had been secretly meeting with ministers from neighboring kingdoms, apparently discussing military strategies and sharing information about Ethermoor's defenses. The evidence suggested he was selling state secrets for personal gain. "How long has this been going on?" Alexander asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Pemberton shifted uncomfortably. "The financial irregularities began shortly after the Queen's coronation, Your Majesty. But the security breaches, those are more recent, perhaps 6 months." Alexander closed the folder and walked to the portrait of his late father that hung above the fireplace. King Frederick had been a wise ruler who had always put the kingdom first, even when it meant making difficult personal choices. Alexander remembered his father's words. "A king must sometimes choose between his heart and his crown, my son. The kingdom must always come first." Down in the Queen's private chambers, Isabella was having tea with her sister Margaret, unaware of the storm brewing in her husband's study. The two women sat on silk cushions in the sunlit parlor, surrounded by fresh roses and laughing about the latest court gossip. "Did you see Lord Whitmore's face when I wore the emerald tiara to dinner last night?" Margaret giggled, helping herself to another pastry from the silver tray. "He nearly choked on his wine when he realized it was worth more than his entire estate." Isabella smiled, but something in her expression seemed distant. She had been feeling uneasy lately, sensing a change in Alexander's behavior toward her family. He had become cold during family dinners, excusing himself early or finding reasons to avoid gatherings altogether. "Margaret," Isabella said quietly, setting down her teacup, "have you noticed anything strange about Alexander lately? He seems different." Margaret waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, sister, all kings get moody sometimes. Father says it's the weight of the crown. Besides, we've been nothing but helpful to him. Father's advice on trade policies has been invaluable, and Edmund's military insights have strengthened the kingdom's defenses." Isabella nodded, but the worry in her eyes remained. She loved her family dearly, and their presence at court had always been a source of comfort to her. Coming from a noble but relatively modest background, Isabella had felt overwhelmed when she first became queen. Having her family close by had helped her adjust to royal life. What she didn't know was that her family's help had gradually transformed from genuine support into calculated manipulation. The Marquis had seen his daughter's marriage as an opportunity to elevate House Blackwood from minor nobility to major power players in the kingdom. Each favor they provided came with strings attached. Each piece of advice served their own interests. In his private chambers, the Marquis of Ravencroft was meeting with a merchant from the neighboring kingdom of Valdris. Maps of trade routes were spread across a wooden table, and bags of gold coins sat openly beside them. The older man's eyes gleamed with greed as he discussed plans that would make him wealthy while weakening Ethermoor's economy. "The king trusts me completely," the Marquis boasted, stroking his gray beard. "He believes I'm helping him strengthen trade relationships. He has no idea that every deal I negotiate gives Valdris the advantage." Meanwhile, Lord Edmund was in the castle's war room, supposedly reviewing defense strategies but actually copying them onto hidden parchments. He had been selling these military secrets to 3 different kingdoms, playing them against each other while enriching himself. The young man felt no guilt about betraying his sister's kingdom. In his mind, loyalty belonged to whoever paid the highest price. Back in the king's study, Alexander was making the most difficult decision of his reign. He had spent hours reading through evidence, consulting with his most trusted advisors, and weighing his options. The facts were undeniable. Isabella's family was systematically betraying the kingdom for personal gain. Pemberton entered again, this time accompanied by Sir Marcus, the head of the royal guard. The knight's face was grim as he placed additional documents on the desk. "Your Majesty," Sir Marcus said, "we have confirmed evidence of Lord Edmund's treachery. Our spies intercepted him passing defense plans to a Valdrian agent just this morning. The Marquis has been discovered to have secret bank accounts in 4 different kingdoms, all filled with money that should have remained in our treasury." Alexander felt his heart breaking as he realized what he had to do. Isabella would be devastated, but the kingdom's survival depended on stopping her family's betrayal before it was too late. Every day they remained at court. More damage was done to Ethermoor's security and prosperity. "Prepare the official documents," Alexander commanded, his voice steady despite the pain in his chest. "House Blackwood is to be stripped of all titles, banned from court and exiled from the kingdom. Their assets are to be frozen, and they are to leave within 24 hours. Sir Marcus nodded solemnly. "And the Queen, Your Majesty, how much should she be told?" Alexander turned back to the window, watching as Isabella's family continued their normal routines below, unaware that their world was about to crumble. He knew this decision would change his marriage forever, but he also knew it was the only way to save his kingdom. "She will learn the truth with everyone else," he said quietly. "Tomorrow morning, we end this." The stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the very foundations of the royal court and test the bonds of love, loyalty, and duty in ways that none of them could have imagined. The great hall of Ravensholm Palace had never felt so cold, despite the warm morning light streaming through its towering stained-glass windows. King Alexander stood at the head of the hall, dressed in his formal royal robes, the crown of Ethermoor heavy upon his head. Behind him, 20 members of the royal guard stood in perfect formation, their faces hidden behind ceremonial masks, their hands resting on their sword hilts. Isabella entered the hall believing she had been summoned for a routine court ceremony. She wore her favorite blue gown, the one Alexander had once said made her eyes sparkle like sapphires. Her family followed close behind. The Marquis of Ravencroft walked with his usual confident stride, Lady Margaret chatted quietly with her lady-in-waiting, and Lord Edmund appeared calm and collected, showing no sign of the guilty knowledge that weighed on his conscience. The Queen's smile faded as she took in the serious atmosphere. The usual courtiers were absent, replaced by stern-faced guards and government officials. Alexander's expression was unlike anything she had ever seen before, cold, distant, and filled with a pain that made her heart skip with worry. "Alexander," Isabella called softly, approaching the throne where her husband stood motionless. "What is this about? Why do you look so troubled?" The king raised his hand, and the hall fell into complete silence. When he spoke, his voice echoed off the stone walls with an authority that made everyone present straighten their spines. "Members of House Blackwood," Alexander began, his eyes never leaving Isabella's face, "you stand accused of high treason against the kingdom of Ethermore." The words hit the hall like a thunderbolt. Lady Margaret gasped audibly, her hand flying to her throat. The Marquis stepped forward, his face reddening with indignation. "Your Majesty, surely there has been some mistake," the older man protested. "We are your loyal servants, your family through marriage. How dare you suggest—" "Silence!" Alexander's voice boomed through the hall. Sir Marcus stepped forward, unrolling a scroll containing the formal charges. "Marquess Blackwood," Sir Marcus announced, "you are charged with embezzling royal funds, accepting bribes from foreign powers, and deliberately weakening Ethermore's trade relationships for personal gain. The evidence against you includes secret bank accounts in Valdris, Thornwick, and Grimhold, containing over 2 million gold crowns stolen from the royal treasury." The Marquis's confident facade crumbled as Sir Marcus continued reading. Isabella watched in growing horror as the charges were laid out in devastating detail. Each accusation felt like a dagger to her heart. "Lady Margaret Blackwood, you are charged with misuse of royal resources and selling access to palace events to foreign spies. Your elaborate parties have cost the kingdom nearly 500,000 crowns, while you collected payments from enemy agents for information about court proceedings." Margaret began to cry, her sobs echoing through the silent hall. Isabella reached out to her sister, but Alexander's next words stopped her cold. "Lord Edmund Blackwood, you are charged with selling state military secrets to enemy kingdoms, putting our soldiers and citizens in mortal danger. Evidence includes copied defense plans found in your chambers and witness testimony of your meetings with foreign agents." Edmund finally showed emotion, his face pale with fear. "Your Majesty, I can explain everything. These charges are—" "The evidence is overwhelming," Alexander interrupted. He looked directly at Isabella, his heart breaking as he saw the devastation in her eyes. "By royal decree, House Blackwood is hereby stripped of all titles, properties, and privileges. You are banished from the kingdom of Ethermore, never to return under penalty of death." Isabella felt the world spinning around her. Her knees buckled, and only her grip on a nearby pillar kept her from falling. "Alexander, no," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "This cannot be true. My family would never. They love this kingdom. They love me." The Marquis, realizing the game was over, suddenly changed tactics. His humble mask dropped, revealing the calculating man beneath. "You self-righteous fool," he snarled at Alexander. "Do you think ruling a kingdom is about honor and nobility? Power is about taking advantage of opportunities. Your father understood that. He made deals. He compromised. He did what was necessary." "My father never betrayed his own people," Alexander replied coldly. "He never sold his kingdom's secrets to enemies or stole from the royal treasury." Edmund stepped forward, desperation clear in his voice. "Isabella, tell him. Tell your husband that family comes first. We've done everything for you to help you become a better queen. Doesn't that loyalty mean anything?" Isabella looked at her brother with tears streaming down her face. "Loyalty," she whispered. "You call betraying my husband's kingdom loyalty to me? You've made me an unknowing accomplice to treason." Sir Marcus nodded to his guards, who moved forward to surround the Blackwood family. "You have 1 hour to gather your personal belongings. You will be escorted to the border under armed guard." "Wait!" Isabella suddenly cried out, stepping between her family and the guards. She turned to Alexander, her eyes pleading. Please, my lord, show mercy. Yes, they have done wrong, but banishment, surely there is another way. Prison, house arrest, anything but exile. Alexander's resolve nearly cracked as he looked at his wife's tear-stained face. For a moment, the love they shared flickered between them like a candle in the wind. But then he remembered the reports about soldiers who had died because of Edmund's betrayal, the families who had lost their savings because of the Marquis's schemes. "The decision is final," Alexander said quietly. "Their actions have endangered every citizen of this kingdom. Mercy to them would be cruelty to our people." Isabella staggered backward as if she had been struck. The full weight of what was happening crashed down on her like a landslide. Her family, the people she had loved and trusted her entire life, had betrayed not just the kingdom, but her personally. They had used her position as queen to commit unthinkable crimes. "How long?" she whispered. "How long have you known?" 3 days, Alexander admitted. "I wanted to be certain, to give them every benefit of doubt. I kept hoping the evidence was wrong." The words hit Isabella harder than any physical blow could have. 3 days. 3 days while she had been planning family dinners and asking Alexander why he seemed distant. 3 days while she had been defending her family to herself, making excuses for their expensive lifestyles and growing influence. Lady Margaret rushed to her sister's side. "Isabella, please, you have to help us. Speak to your husband. Make him understand that families make mistakes, but love forgives everything." Isabella looked at her sister with new eyes, seeing clearly for the first time. "Love?" she repeated softly. "Is that what you call using me to steal from innocent people? Is that what you call putting our soldiers in danger? You never loved me, Margaret. You loved what I could give you." The truth of her own words hit Isabella like a physical force. Her vision blurred, her breath came in short gasps, and she felt her legs give way completely. This time, there was no pillar to catch her. She collapsed to the cold marble floor, her blue gown spreading around her like spilled water, her consciousness fading as the guards looked on with professional indifference. Alexander rushed forward, catching her before her head could hit the stone. For a moment, he was no longer a king making a terrible decision, but a husband holding his broken wife. "Get the royal physician," he commanded, his voice cracking with emotion. "Now!" As the guards escorted the Blackwood family from the hall, their protests and pleas echoing off the walls, Alexander cradled Isabella in his arms, knowing that while he had saved his kingdom, he might have lost the woman he loved forever. 3 weeks had passed since the Great Hall confrontation, and Ravensholm Palace felt like a tomb. Queen Isabella remained confined to her chambers, seeing no one except her physician and a single trusted lady-in-waiting. The royal court whispered in corners, uncertain whether their queen would ever recover from the devastating revelation about her family's betrayal. King Alexander buried himself in state affairs, working from dawn until midnight to repair the damage caused by the Blackwood family's treachery. The recovered funds were being redistributed to the citizens who had suffered from the Marquess's schemes, and new defense strategies were being developed to replace the ones Edmund had sold to enemy kingdoms. But despite these necessary actions, the king's heart remained heavy with grief for his wife's pain. Dr. Whitfield, the royal physician, emerged from Isabella's chambers carrying his black medical bag and wearing a troubled expression. He had been treating the queen for what he called severe melancholia, brought on by traumatic shock. In simpler terms, Isabella's spirit appeared to be broken beyond his ability to heal. Alexander intercepted the doctor in the corridor outside the queen's chambers. "How is she today?" he asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Physically, Her Majesty is recovering," Dr. Whitfield replied carefully. "She is eating small amounts and sleeping more regularly, but mentally, Your Majesty, she seems to have lost all interest in life. She stares out the window for hours, speaks only when directly addressed, and shows no emotion whatsoever. In my 40 years of practice, I have rarely seen such profound heartbreak. Alexander nodded grimly. He had tried to visit Isabella several times, but she refused to see him. Through her lady-in-waiting, she had sent word that she could not bear to look at him, knowing that he had been right about her family while she had been so terribly wrong. Down in the palace kitchens, the staff worked quietly, preparing meals that the Queen barely touched. Cook Margaret, who had served the royal family for 20 years, wiped tears from her eyes as she prepared Isabella's favorite soup. "Poor dear," she murmured to the kitchen maid. "She trusted them completely, loved them with her whole heart. How can someone recover from such betrayal?" The kingdom itself was slowly healing from the Blackwood family's damage. Trade relationships were being rebuilt on honest foundations, and the military was implementing new security measures to prevent future leaks. Citizens who had been cheated out of their savings were receiving compensation from the recovered funds, but everyone knew that the royal marriage might be permanently damaged. In the throne room, Alexander held court for the first time since the exile. Nobles and ministers approached cautiously, uncertain how to address the situation. Lord Pemberton presented the weekly reports, including updates on the Blackwood family's fate. "Your Majesty," Pemberton said quietly, "our border guards report that the Blackwood family has settled temporarily in Grimhold Kingdom. The Marquess attempted to seek asylum by offering them information about our trade routes, but they rejected his proposals and ordered him to leave within a month." Alexander felt no satisfaction in hearing about his former in-law's continued struggles. "And Lord Edmund? Captured trying to enter Valdres with stolen documents from their time here? The Valdrians imprisoned him as a spy, believing he was working for us. Lady Margaret has taken refuge in a convent in Thornwick." The irony was bitter. The family that had betrayed Ether Moore was now being rejected by the very kingdoms they had tried to serve. Their greed and treachery had left them friendless and homeless. As the court session ended, Alexander made a decision that surprised everyone present. "Clear my schedule for the remainder of the day," he announced. "I will be unavailable for any meetings." Instead of returning to his study, Alexander walked to the palace gardens where he and Isabella had spent their happiest moments together. He sat on the marble bench beneath the rose arbor where they had often shared breakfast during their early married days. The roses were in full bloom, their fragrance filling the air with memories of laughter and love. After an hour of sitting alone with his thoughts, Alexander was surprised to see a figure approaching through the garden paths. Isabella moved slowly, wearing a simple white dress and a dark shawl. Her face was pale and thin, her eyes red from weeks of crying, but she was walking on her own. "May I join you?" Isabella asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Alexander's heart leaped with hope, but he kept his voice gentle. "Of course. This is your garden, too." They sat in silence for several minutes, both lost in memories of happier times. Finally, Isabella spoke. "I have been thinking," she said, staring at the roses rather than looking at her husband, "about everything that has happened, about my family, about you, about myself." Alexander waited patiently, afraid that saying the wrong thing might cause her to retreat back to her chambers. "I was so angry with you," Isabella continued. "So hurt that you had known about their crimes for 3 days without telling me. I felt betrayed by everyone I loved." "I wanted to protect you," Alexander said quietly. "I hoped somehow the evidence was wrong, that there was an explanation that would clear them." Isabella finally turned to look at him, and Alexander was startled by the change in her eyes. The innocent trust that had always been there was gone, replaced by a sadness that seemed much older than her years. "I understand now why you had to be certain," she said, "and I understand why you could not tell me immediately. If you had warned me, I would have confronted them. I would have given them time to destroy evidence or flee. My love for them would have helped them escape justice. Alexander reached out tentatively and touched her hand. She did not pull away. I have learned something terrible about myself, Isabella whispered. I loved them so blindly that I ignored signs of their selfishness. They used my position to hurt innocent people, and I was too naive to see it. How many citizens suffered because I brought them into the court? How many soldiers died because I gave them access to you? That guilt is not yours to bear, Alexander said firmly. You acted with love and trust. They acted with greed and betrayal. Their crimes are their own. Isabella was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was stronger. The kingdom must come first, she said, echoing the words Alexander's father had often spoken. I see that now. You made the right choice, even though it cost us both so much pain. Alexander felt tears building in his eyes. I was afraid I had lost you forever. Isabella looked at him with the first genuine emotion she had shown in weeks. You nearly did. But sitting alone in my chambers, I realized something. My family's love for me was conditional. It depended on what I could give them. But your love, even when you had to break my heart to save the kingdom, you still held me when I collapsed. You still fought for my life when I wanted to give up. She stood up from the bench and extended her hand to him. I do not know if we can go back to who we were before. Too much has happened. Too much has changed. But perhaps we can build something new, something stronger, based on truth instead of illusion. Alexander took her hand and rose to his feet. We will heal together, he promised. The kingdom will recover, and so will we. As they walked back toward the palace hand in hand, both knew that their marriage would never be the same. The innocent happiness of their early days was gone forever, but in its place, something deeper was growing. A partnership built on shared trials, mutual respect, and the hard-won wisdom that comes from surviving betrayal together. The kingdom of Ethermore had been wounded, but not destroyed. The royal marriage had been tested, but not broken. And perhaps most importantly, Queen Isabella had learned that true loyalty is not about blind trust, but about choosing to stand by someone even when that choice requires sacrifice. In the distance, the palace bells chimed the evening hour, and for the first time in weeks, the sound carried hope instead of sorrow through the halls of Raven's home palace.